This is the decision that can either quietly destroy your marriage or rebuild it into something stronger than it has ever been. And if you walk away from this message right now, you may spend the next several years wondering why nothing in your relationship ever truly changed. So stay with me, because what you are about to hear may be exactly what your heart has been waiting for. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. I want you to pause wherever you are right now and comment the words, "I love Allah." Not just as a phrase, but as a reminder to yourself and to your heart that before we talk about your marriage, before we talk about the pain, the silence, the longing, and the confusion, we reconnect with the one who placed love in our hearts to begin with. Comment, "I love Allah." Let it be the anchor of everything we discuss today. Now, let me begin with something that most people never want to admit. There is a specific kind of loneliness that does not come from being alone. It comes from being in a room with someone you love or once loved and feeling completely invisible. You are sitting at the same table, sleeping in the same bed, living under the same roof, and yet there is a distance between you that feels wider than any ocean. You speak but feel unheard. You give but feel unappreciated. You try but feel like you are failing. And quietly, slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to wonder whether staying is worth it, whether things can ever really change, whether you were ever truly seen by the person you chose to build your life with. I want you to know something right now. That pain you are feeling is real. That exhaustion you carry is real. And the confusion of not knowing whether to hold on or let go, that is one of the most difficult emotional spaces a human being can inhabit. You are not weak for feeling it. You are not dramatic for being affected by it. You are simply someone who cared deeply, gave generously, and is now standing at a crossroads that nobody prepared you for. Most people who reach this crossroads make one of two mistakes. Either they explode, they say things they cannot take back, they make decisions from a place of pain rather than wisdom, and they damage whatever remains of the relationship beyond repair. Or they go completely silent, they swallow the hurt, they tell themselves that this is just how marriage is, and they slowly begin to disappear inside themselves. They become a version of themselves that is functional but not alive, present but not truly there, and neither of these paths leads anywhere good. What I want to offer you today is something different. I want to guide you through a process of understanding, real understanding. Not the kind that tells you what to do, but the kind that helps you see clearly for perhaps the first time what has actually been happening in your marriage, why it happened, what your role in it might be, and what Allah may be trying to teach you through all of it. Stay with me, because this next part is where most people finally begin to understand themselves. Marriages do not break suddenly. That is one of the most important things I want you to understand. There is no single moment where everything falls apart. It is not the argument that happened last Thursday. It is not the harsh word that was spoken 6 months ago. It is not even the event that feels like the turning point. What truly breaks a marriage is something far more subtle, far more quiet, and far more dangerous than any single incident. It is the accumulation of small things left unaddressed. It is the tiny moments of disconnection that were never repaired. It is the words that needed to be spoken but never were. It is the emotional needs that were never expressed because they felt too vulnerable to voice. And over time, these small gaps become walls. And walls, once built high enough, feel impossible to climb over. Think about the beginning. Think about when you first came together, when the world felt full of possibility, and the presence of this person made you feel seen and known and chosen. In those early days, you were curious about each other. You asked questions. You listened with genuine interest. You wanted to know what they were thinking, what they were feeling, what made them laugh, what kept them awake at night. There was a tenderness in how you engaged, a softness, an intentionality, and then life happened. Responsibilities grew, routines set in, children perhaps arrived, work demanded more. And somewhere in the midst of all of that, the curiosity began to fade. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, conversation became coordination. Interaction became logistical. And the emotional depth that once held you together began to shallow. And here is what nobody tells you about that process. It is almost always mutual. Both partners tend to withdraw simultaneously, both for different reasons, both telling themselves different stories. One might say, I stopped sharing because every time I did, it led to an argument. The other might say, I pulled away because I never felt like I was enough. And both of them, alone in their thoughts, begin to construct a version of events that places them at the center of the suffering. Both of them convinced they are the one trying. Both of them exhausted. Both of them lost. I want you to sit with this for a moment. Imagine this: two people living side by side, each quietly drowning, each waiting for the other to notice, each telling themselves that the silence is the other person's fault. And the tragedy is not that they stopped loving each other. The tragedy is that they stopped showing it. And love that is not expressed does not sustain. Love that is not nurtured does not grow. And love that is taken for granted eventually begins to question its own existence. Now I need to take you somewhere important. I need to ground this conversation in something that goes beyond psychology, beyond relationship advice, beyond anything that human wisdom alone can offer. I need to take you back to why marriage exists at all. Our Almighty Creator did not create marriage as a social contract or a legal arrangement. He created it as a source of peace, a place of mercy, a sacred space where two souls could rest in each other, find comfort in each other, and support each other on the journey back to Him. He created it so that neither of you would have to face this world alone, so that in your moments of fear, you would have someone beside you. In your moments of grief, you would have someone to hold you. In your moments of joy, you would have someone to share it with. This is what marriage was designed to be. Now, I want you to do something uncomfortable. I want you to hold that vision in one hand and hold the reality of your marriage in the other. And I want you to sit honestly with the gap between them, not to punish yourself, not to spiral into blame, but to use that gap as a compass. Because the distance between where you are and where your marriage was meant to be is not evidence of failure. It is a map toward healing, if you are willing to read it with honesty and courage. Emotional connection in a marriage is not optional. This is something that many people, particularly those who grew up in homes where emotions were not discussed openly, have never been taught. We often think that if we are fulfilling our responsibilities, if we are providing, if we are present physically, if we are not doing anything overtly wrong, then we are being a good spouse. But emotional availability is a responsibility too, and its absence does a kind of damage that is invisible but devastating. A person can go years feeling emotionally starved inside a marriage that looks perfectly functional from the outside. And that kind of hunger, the hunger to be truly known, truly heard, truly understood, is one of the deepest human needs that exists. Let me describe something to you that you may recognize. You come home after a long and difficult day. Something happened, something that unsettled you, something that left you needing to feel connected. And you reach out, maybe verbally, maybe just by being nearby, maybe just by making eye contact and hoping something warm comes back. And what you receive instead is distraction. A phone screen, a clipped response, a physical presence that is nevertheless completely absent emotionally. And so you go quiet. You tell yourself it is fine. You go through the motions of the evening, dinner, perhaps some television, the routine of preparing for sleep. And in that silence, something small but significant happens. a part of you retreats, not dramatically. You do not make a decision. You do not say anything. But a tiny part of your heart pulls back just a little and builds a small wall, just a brick or two. And tomorrow it happens again, and the day after. And over weeks and months and years, those bricks become a structure. And suddenly you are standing on opposite sides of a wall that neither of you consciously built, wondering how it got there. This is the nature of emotional neglect. It is not always intentional. It is not always unkind. It is often just absence, just inattentiveness. Just two people so caught up in the noise of their own inner worlds that they forget to reach across the distance and actually touch the person they love. Not physically, though that matters too, but emotionally, with words, with presence, with the simple but profound act of actually seeing someone. And then there is the experience of one-sided communication, which I want to speak to very directly, because if you have ever felt this, you know how quietly devastating it is. One-sided communication is when you find yourself consistently being the one who reaches out, the one who initiates conversation, the one who tries to create connection, while the other person remains withdrawn, distracted, or simply unavailable. You talk, but you feel as though your words disappear into the air without landing anywhere. You share something that matters to you, and the response you receive makes you feel foolish for having shared it. You ask a question and receive a single syllable in return. And after enough experiences like this, something in you begins to change. You stop sharing, not because you no longer have things to share, but because the experience of sharing and receiving nothing back is more painful than simply keeping it inside. And this is where emotional withdrawal begins from the person who was originally trying to connect. Because there is a limit to how many times a human heart can reach out and return empty-handed before it begins to protect itself. And when that protection kicks in, when the partner who was once actively seeking connection goes quiet, suddenly the dynamic shifts in a way that neither person expected, and often it is only then that the withdrawn partner notices. When the one who was always there stops being there. When the silence is no longer coming from them alone. But by that point, real damage has already been done. Trust has been quietly eroded. Safety has been quietly compromised. And rebuilding requires something far more deliberate, far more intentional, and far more humble than most people are initially prepared to offer. I want to take you now into a space that feels perhaps a little uncomfortable. I want to talk about what happens inside you when the connection in your marriage begins to fade. Because I have found that the internal experience of a person in a disconnected marriage is often one of the most painful and confusing places a human being can live. From the outside, everything looks fine. The bills are paid, the house is maintained. There are no dramatic scenes, but inside there is a quiet chaos that is hard to name and even harder to explain to someone who has not felt it. There is a kind of loneliness that visits you in the most ordinary moments. While you are washing dishes, while you are driving to work, while you are sitting in the same room as your spouse and suddenly realize that you have not truly spoken to each other in days. Not really spoken, not with depth or vulnerability or genuine curiosity, just logistical exchanges, just the coordination of a shared life without the warmth that makes it worth sharing. And then comes the self-doubt. This is something I want to address very carefully, because self-doubt in a disconnected marriage is both common and dangerous. When we are not receiving emotional nourishment from our closest relationship, we begin to turn inward and question ourselves. Am I asking for too much? Is it normal to feel this way? Maybe I am being overly sensitive. Maybe my expectations are unrealistic. Maybe this is just what long-term marriage is supposed to feel like. And so instead of identifying the genuine problem and addressing it, you begin to pathologize your own need for connection. You begin to shrink yourself. You begin to tell yourself that wanting to feel truly loved is a form of weakness or immaturity. And that, my friend, is one of the most heartbreaking things I witness in people who are struggling in their marriages. Not the conflict, not the arguments, but the quiet internal surrender. The moment when a person who deserves to be deeply loved begins to believe that perhaps they are asking for something that does not exist, that perhaps love of the kind they imagined is not real, that perhaps they should simply be grateful for what they have and stop wanting more. I want to say this to you clearly. Your need for emotional connection is not weakness. Your desire to feel truly known by your spouse is not childish. Your longing for genuine intimacy in your marriage is not an unrealistic fantasy. It is a legitimate human need, and it is a right that Allah has placed within the covenant of marriage. Do not let your pain teach you to want less than you deserve. But here is where I also need to guide you gently into something that requires real courage. Because part of genuine self-awareness in a marriage is the willingness to honestly examine your own role in what has unfolded. And I say this not to assign blame. I say this because growth is only possible when we move from the position of pure victim to the position of honest participant. And this shift, while uncomfortable, is one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself and for your marriage. Think about your own communication style. Think about the moments when you had something important to say but expressed it in a way that made your spouse defensive rather than open. Think about the times when your emotional reaction to a situation was more intense than the situation perhaps warranted, and how that intensity may have taught your spouse to avoid certain topics with you. Think about the unspoken expectations you carried into this marriage. Things you assumed your spouse would naturally understand and provide. Things you never articulated clearly. Things that you held them accountable for without ever telling them were expectations to begin with. None of this is about self-blame. All of this is about self-awareness. And the difference between those two things is everything. Because when we move from blame to awareness, from judgment to curiosity, something remarkable becomes possible. We stop waiting for the other person to change first. We begin to take responsibility for what we can actually control. And in doing so, we often discover that the change we were waiting for in our partner becomes more accessible the moment we begin to shift ourselves. Now, I want to bring you into understanding the other person. Because one of the most transformative things that can happen in a struggling marriage is when one partner genuinely tries to understand what is happening inside the other without agenda, without the goal of winning an argument, simply out of a sincere desire to know and understand the person they chose. Emotional absence in a spouse does not always mean a lack of love. I want you to hear that carefully. Someone can love you deeply and still be emotionally unavailable to you. Not because they do not care, but because they do not know how to show up in the way you need. There are people who grew up in homes where emotions were never expressed openly, where vulnerability was treated as weakness, where love was shown through provision and action rather than words and presence. And those people carry those patterns into adulthood without even realizing that what they are doing is leaving their partner emotionally starving. There are people who withdraw not because they are cruel, but because conflict feels genuinely threatening to them. Because somewhere in their past, emotional engagement led to pain or shame or rejection. And so their nervous system learned that the safest thing to do when things feel intense is to go quiet, to close down, to disappear into themselves. This is not manipulation in its deliberate form, though it can feel like it from the outside. It is a survival mechanism that once served a purpose and is now causing harm in a relationship that deserves something better. There are also those who carry wounds from past relationships, wounds they never fully processed, wounds that now make them hesitant to be fully present in this one. Fear of being hurt again, fear of being vulnerable only to be abandoned, fear of giving everything and finding it is not enough. These are real fears, even when they are not voiced. And understanding that your spouse may be operating from a place of fear rather than indifference can be the beginning of a profound shift in how you see and approach them. None of this excuses a pattern of emotional neglect. None of this means you are obligated to carry indefinitely what your spouse refuses to address. But understanding the roots of their behavior creates a space for compassion that does not exist when we only see their actions through the lens of our own pain. Now I want to talk about expectations, because I believe that unspoken, unexamined expectations are one of the greatest silent destroyers of marriages that I have ever encountered. We all enter marriage with a picture in our minds of what it is supposed to look like. Some of those pictures come from our families of origin, from watching how our parents loved or failed to love each other. Some come from culture. Some come from our deepest personal longings for safety and belonging. And very few of us ever sit down and explicitly share those pictures with our spouse. And so we begin. Two people, each carrying their own unspoken blueprint of what a good marriage looks like, each waiting for the other to intuitively understand and fulfill those blueprints, and each quietly growing disappointed when the other person fails to meet expectations they were never told existed. He expects her to express warmth in the way his mother did. She expects him to communicate in the way her father never did, but she always wished he would. And neither of them knows what the other is expecting, and neither of them is asking, and both of them are slowly accumulating evidence that the other person does not really care. Stay with me here, because this next part matters deeply. The practice of intentional communication is not something that comes naturally to most people. We tend to communicate reactively, meaning we speak from the heat of our emotions. We respond to what was said rather than what was meant. We escalate when we feel attacked rather than pausing to understand. And reactive communication, no matter how honest it is in its rawness, rarely produces the outcome both people actually want. It relieves pressure in the short term, but creates more distance in the long term. Intentional communication is different. It requires you to slow down before you speak, to ask yourself, what is it that I actually need right now? Not what am I angry about, but what is the underlying need that is not being met? It requires you to choose your timing carefully, not approaching a difficult conversation when either person is exhausted or distracted or already emotionally flooded. It requires you to speak in a way that opens a door rather than closes one. To say, I have been feeling disconnected and I really want us to find our way back to each other, rather than you never pay attention to me. And it requires vulnerability, the kind of vulnerability that is genuinely terrifying for many people. Because to speak your truth softly, without the armor of anger, without the protection of blame, is to expose yourself to the possibility of being misunderstood or dismissed. And that risk for someone who has already experienced too much disappointment in this relationship can feel impossible. But it is also the only pathway back to genuine connection. Emotional connection is not rebuilt through one transformative conversation. I wish I could tell you otherwise, but the truth is that connection is restored through consistency. Through small, repeated acts of attentiveness and care. It is the moment you put down your phone and make eye contact when your spouse is speaking. It is the question you ask because you are genuinely curious about their experience of the day. It is the thank you you offer for something they do so routinely that it has become invisible. It is the reaching out with a hand, the remembering of something small that matters to them. These are not grand gestures. They are not dramatic declarations. They are the daily practice of choosing to see and be seen, and they accumulate over time into something that feels remarkably like love being renewed. But rebuilding also requires patience, and patience in the context of a struggling marriage is one of the most spiritually demanding things Allah can ask of us. Because patience here does not mean passive resignation. It does not mean tolerating indefinitely what is harmful. It does not mean suppressing legitimate needs in the name of keeping the peace. True patience in a marriage is active. It is the decision to remain engaged with the work of healing even when the results are slow. It is the willingness to extend grace to someone who is still figuring out how to show up for you. It is the understanding that change, real and lasting change in another person, rarely happens overnight, and that your consistency in how you engage may be the very thing that eventually creates the safety they need to open up. And yet, alongside patience, there must also be boundaries. I want to be very clear about this because there is a dangerous misconception in some conversations about marriage, particularly in religious communities, that a good spouse simply endures, that suffering in silence is a form of virtue, that placing any limit on what you are willing to accept is somehow selfish or unspiritual. This is not true. Allah did not design you to be a vessel for someone else's dysfunction. He did not create you to dissolve yourself in service of a relationship that consistently takes from you without ever giving back. Setting boundaries in a marriage is not a rejection of your spouse. It is a statement of self-respect that ultimately protects the relationship itself. Because a person who loses themselves entirely in the process of trying to save their marriage has nothing left to bring to it. Boundaries are the guardrails that keep you intact. They communicate your needs clearly. They invite your spouse to understand what you require in order to thrive. And they give the relationship a container that is honest rather than one that exists only through your perpetual self-sacrifice. Now let me take you somewhere that I believe is the deepest and most important territory of this entire conversation. Because everything we have discussed so far, the patterns of disconnection, the communication struggles, the emotional withdrawal, the unspoken expectations, all of it exists within a broader spiritual context that most of us forget to include when we are analyzing our relationships. And that context is our relationship with Allah. Here is something I have come to understand deeply. The state of our most intimate human relationships is often a reflection of the state of our relationship with our Creator. When we are spiritually grounded, when we are regularly in communion with Allah, when our hearts are softened by remembrance and gratitude and surrender, we tend to show up differently in our relationships. We have more patience, we have more generosity. We are less reactive and more reflective. We are more willing to extend grace because we ourselves are living in the experience of being given grace that we did not earn. But when we drift from that connection, when the prayers become mechanical, when gratitude fades into entitlement, when we stop turning to Allah with our real struggles and instead carry them entirely on our own shoulders, something shifts in us. We become more rigid, more defensive, more focused on what we are not receiving and less aware of what we are failing to give. The very qualities that a struggling marriage needs most, patience, softness, generosity, humility, are precisely the qualities that a disconnected spiritual life struggles to produce. So let me ask you this, not as a judgment, but as a genuine question for your own reflection. In the midst of this pain you are carrying, in the exhaustion of this struggle with your marriage, how often are you turning to Allah with it? Not just the general prayers of daily life, but truly bringing this specific wound, this specific longing, this specific fear into your moments of supplication. Have you knelt in the quietness of the night and spoken to Him about your marriage with the same honesty and vulnerability that you wish you could speak to your spouse with? Because Allah already knows. He knows the weight of what you are carrying. He knows the prayers of your heart that your lips have not yet voiced. He knows the precise quality of your loneliness and the exact shape of your longing. And He is not distant from it. He is closer to you than your own heartbeat, and He hears every whisper that rises from a broken heart. Supplication is powerful, not as a last resort when everything else has failed, but as a first response to anything that matters. When you feel lost in your marriage, make supplication. When you do not know how to approach your spouse, make supplication. When you have tried and it has not worked, and you are on the verge of giving up, make supplication. Not because prayer is a magic formula that instantly transforms your circumstances, but because the act of turning your face toward Allah in your moment of need does something to you. It reminds you of who is in control. It loosens the grip of fear and anxiety. It reconnects you to a source of strength and wisdom that is infinitely greater than your own capacity. And hearts, as we are reminded, are between the fingers of our Almighty Creator, and He turns them as He wills. There comes a point in every difficult marriage where the person who has been working and trying and waiting must sit down honestly with themselves and ask a question that requires tremendous clarity and courage. And that question is this: what am I actually being called to do here? Not what do I feel like doing, not what would give me the most immediate relief, but what, with wisdom and faith and genuine sincerity, am I being called toward? And the answer to that question is different for different people. For some, the answer is to continue with renewed effort, to apply what they have understood, to return to the work with greater self-awareness and intentionality, to give the marriage the consistent investment it has perhaps been lacking. For some, the answer is acceptance, not the giving up that comes from defeat, but the mature and spiritually grounded recognition that this marriage is what it is, that their spouse may not change in the ways they have hoped, and that peace is still available within that reality if they are willing to shift their expectations and find meaning in the relationship that does exist, rather than grieving indefinitely for the one that does not. And for some, after genuine effort, after sincere prayer, after patient and repeated attempts to rebuild what has been broken, the answer may be that this marriage has reached its natural end. And while separation is never the easy path, and while it carries its own grief and complexity and loss, it is sometimes the most honest and the most merciful thing that can be chosen for both people involved. Allah did not create separation as a punishment. He permitted it as a mercy for those times when the union itself has become the source of more harm than good. Whatever your answer is, I urge you to find it not from a place of impulse or exhaustion or wounded pride, but from a place of genuine reflection, sincere prayer, and the kind of deep self-honesty that only becomes possible when we are willing to lay down our defenses and look clearly at what is actually happening. There is also a concept I want to gently introduce, and that is the concept of acceptance in its most nuanced and honest form. Because I think acceptance is widely misunderstood. People tend to hear the word acceptance and translate it as giving up, as accepting defeat, as deciding that nothing matters. But true acceptance is something far more powerful than that. True acceptance is the act of seeing reality clearly, without the distortion of what we wish it were, and choosing to engage with that reality with our full presence, rather than spending our emotional energy fighting a version of it that does not exist. Acceptance means acknowledging that your spouse is who they are right now, not who they might become, not who you need them to be, but who they currently are. And choosing with full awareness of that reality how you want to engage with it. This does not mean you stop wanting things to be better. It does not mean you stop communicating your needs, but it means you stop making your own peace contingent on their transformation. You stop outsourcing your well-being to someone who may not currently have the capacity to provide it. And this is where the journey turns inward in a way that is deeply personal and deeply spiritual. Because regardless of what happens with your marriage, you are a person who deserves to heal. You are a person who deserves to reclaim the parts of yourself that this struggle may have quietly eroded. Your sense of worth is not determined by whether your spouse finally sees you. Your value is not contingent on whether this relationship becomes what you hoped it would be. You were created by Allah with inherent dignity and inherent worth, and no amount of emotional neglect from another human being can actually touch that, even when it feels like it has. Healing from a painful marriage, whether that marriage ultimately continues or ends, requires intentional care for your own interior life. It requires that you begin to notice and attend to your own emotional needs with the same diligence that you have been trying to tend to the needs of the relationship. It requires that you rebuild your relationship with yourself, that you learn to speak kindly to yourself in the moments of self-doubt, that you allow yourself to grieve what has been lost without letting that grief consume you, and that you gradually, gently begin to rediscover the person you were before the pain became the loudest thing in your life. I want to remind you of something that I believe with complete conviction. Allah sees you. In every moment of this struggle, in every tear you have shed in private, in every prayer you have offered from a place of uncertainty and fear, He has seen you. He has not been absent from your pain. He has been present in it, working through it, using it as a means of drawing you closer to Him, of teaching you things about yourself and about trust and about surrender that you could not have learned any other way. And here is what I know to be true about pain in the life of a believer. It is never without purpose. What feels like loss is often protection. What feels like abandonment is often redirection. What feels like the collapse of everything you hoped for is often the clearing away of what was blocking something better. Allah does not waste your suffering. He refines through it. He builds through it. He opens through it doors that you could not see from where you were standing before. So I want to speak directly to your heart right now. Wherever you are in this journey, whether you are at the beginning of realizing that something needs to change, or somewhere in the middle of trying and being unsure whether it is working, or at the painful edge of wondering whether you have the strength to continue, I want you to know that you are not alone in this. The very fact that you are here, that you have stayed with this message, that you have allowed yourself to sit with these difficult questions, tells me something important about you. It tells me that you still care, that you still believe things could be different, that there is still a part of you that has not given up on love. And that part of you, that part that still hopes, still tries, still reaches, is worth honoring. Do not silence it. Do not let disappointment or exhaustion convince you that it is naive or foolish to keep caring. Caring is not weakness. Trying is not failure. The willingness to feel your pain fully rather than numbing it or running from it is one of the bravest things a human being can do. What I want to leave you with is not a formula. I cannot give you a 10-step plan that guarantees your marriage will become what you need it to be. What I can give you is this, a reminder that growth is always possible, that Allah is always working even when you cannot see how, that your job in this moment is not to have all the answers, but simply to take one honest step in the direction of clarity. One conversation, one prayer, One decision to stop avoiding something you know needs to be faced. One of the greatest dangers of a message like this is that people listen, feel moved, perhaps even cry, and then return to exactly the same patterns the moment the feeling fades. And I am asking you, genuinely asking you, not to let that happen. Not this time. Because you have already spent enough time in the pain you are in. And the definition of change is not understanding something new. It is doing something differently. So here is what I am asking of you. Take one thing from this message. Just one. Something that resonated, something that made you pause, something that made you think, that is me, that is my marriage, that is what I have been doing or not doing. And do something with it today. Not when the timing is perfect, not when you feel fully ready, because the timing will never be perfect and you will never feel fully ready. But you can take one small step, one honest conversation, one moment of genuine vulnerability, one prayer that is more raw and specific than any you have offered before. And if you are willing to take that step, I want to know. I want you to share your situation in the comments. Not because I can solve your problem, but because there is something profoundly healing about naming your struggle in a community of people who are going through something similar. You are not as alone in this as it sometimes feels. There are thousands of people listening to this message right now who feel exactly what you feel, who are carrying the same confusion and the same longing and the same exhaustion. Let them see your courage. Let them be reminded that they are not alone either. And please, comment "I love Allah" one more time. Let it be your declaration that no matter what is happening in your marriage, no matter how uncertain things feel, no matter how much pain you are carrying, your connection to Allah is not broken. Your faith is not diminished by your struggle. And your heart, however battered it may feel right now, still knows where to turn. Because here is the final truth I want to leave you with. Allah controls hearts, all of them, yours and your spouse's, and every person who has ever caused you pain or confusion. He can turn a closed heart open. He can soften what has been hardened. He can restore what has been lost. He can rebuild what has been broken. Not always in the way we expect, not always on the timeline we prefer, but always in the way that is most merciful and most wise. Trust that even when it is hard, even when you cannot see it working, trust that the one who placed love in your heart in the first place has not forgotten what He placed there, and that He is more invested in your healing and your growth and your peace than you can possibly imagine. This is not the end of your story. This is the moment where it begins to turn. Do not ignore what you have understood today. The people who stay stuck are the ones who hear something that matters and then return to the same patterns, the same silence, the same avoidance, waiting for something to change without ever becoming the change themselves. You have been given a mirror today. Look into it with courage and then take one step forward. May Allah bless your marriage, heal your heart, and guide you with wisdom and clarity through everything that lies ahead.